Derek, welcome to the Concrete Everest podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Brian?
I'm good. And you know what? Usually I'm pretty good about making sure I know how to pronounce the last names right. I didn't do that this time, but Derek Pivko. Am I saying that right?
I'm actually very impressed. I think you're one of the few people, my coworkers can't even pronounce my last name. So however you did my research on me, congratulations. You're one of the few people that can do it. So you got bonus points on me already.
Hey, all right. Hey, you know, that's I'm a guy that's had my last name pronounced a bunch of different ways, and my first name as well. Not related to our story here that we're going to get into today, but you know, Brian is a terrible name for birthday cakes because it always comes back Brian. But anyways, Derek, why don't we take a moment and just let you introduce yourself to our listeners, if you would.
Who am I? That's a typical conversation starter, but it is the icebreaker. The way I describe myself, I am an interdisciplinary. It's basically a multitude of different observations in my life. I have various backgrounds, including with my education, as well as my past and current employment. I've been very fortunate to meet some great people in my life and some unsuspected inspiration as well, which I'll be digging into in today's podcast as well.
Yeah, and we talked about this. What I like about your story is it's not the typical story that we hear or we've heard on this podcast. Usually there's some sort of trauma that's occurred in the past, and but for you it was as an adult. You like you said, it was this unexpected inspiration from a person that maybe most people listening or watching wouldn't even think of as being an inspiration to anyone. So let's get into that a little bit. You can just go ahead and start the story and tell it how you will.
Okay. This is a story I haven't really spoken out loud. I have been given permission to talk about it as well. It's a sensitive topic, so it may not be for everybody, but for me, this story of an individual has changed my life, and it's also gave me the inspiration to go back to school for the third time. I believe the term is third time is a charm. Unfortunately, I'm going for the fourth term when I graduate in February. But when I was in my late 20s, I was working as a corrections officer here in the county jail in Sussex County. If you go on Google, you type in Sussex County, New Jersey, the answer you're going to find out is why. Nothing ever happens in my town or my county as well. However, back in 2015, a lot of things were going on. And prior to going into corrections, when I got hired off civil service, we had a lot of stories that never happened in our area going on at once. One of the biggest stories that ever happened in our county involved a murder of a former corrections lieutenant. His name was Dennis Pegg. What happened was that this was also during the time, a little after the Penn State Jerry Sandusky trial. I'm sure you know about what happened over that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have a term called a repressed memory, and one person who had a childhood similar to what went on with the other kids at Penn State with Jerry Sandusky was a gentleman named Clark Fredericks, who at the age of 8 experienced outcomes that a child, adult, or no one should ever experience. This guy his former neighbor, Dennis Pegg, was a Boy Scout leader at the time, and he had access to anybody. He was well liked in the community. He actually brought home former corrections inmates to mentor them. He was trying to be the good guy, but lo and behold, there was a Satan behind him. And lo and behold, back as I go back, and I'm getting a little bit off topic, but however, Clark had a open heart surgery when he was eight years old. Back then, granted, I don't have open heart surgery, but the scars were a lot bigger from his age. Clark is probably about 20 years older than me, so as science has applied, things have changed. The scar is a little bit smaller now. However, Dennis took that as an advantage and said, hey, I'll give you a quarter if I'm able to touch the scar. And unfortunately, the quarter happened, and other things happened to Clark as well. And there was rumors about what was going on. And his father, Clark's father, said, "Hey, has this happened to you at all?" And Clark embarrassedly and ashamedly said no. And unfortunately, that term no turned into a lot of guilt. And when the Jerry Sandusky trial happened, this is when Clark's life started to really fall apart because he blocked out a lot of these terms in his life. And it just, when he saw this thing coming on national news with Sandusky, with the trial going on, it broke his heart and he had his breaking point. Clark had a great job. I believe he graduated from Northeastern up in Boston. Wonderful college. I could not get into that college, and my life depended on it. But but unfortunately, his past went back to haunt him as well. Clark started drinking at an early age. School was easy for him, but unfortunately, as I said earlier, Clark's past came to haunt him when the trial started going on. Lo and behold, he started experimenting with drugs. Drinking was his introduction. Then, unfortunately, alcohol wasn't enough for him, so he ended up doing cocaine, and unfortunately, he ended up going to heroin. When he spoke to one of his friends, he explained everything that happened to him, and his friend recommended, "You got to take care of this." So lo and behold, on a night in June of 2012, they drove to Peg's house, and the screen door was unlocked, and Clark walked into the guy's house and say, "You remember me?" And let's just say in the nicest way, a struggle occurred, and Peg was killed that night. Dennis Pig was murdered that night. And Clark was arrested the next day. Clark was planning on suicide by cop. He realized that his life was practically over after that. And when he was arrested, sorry, this is actually a really difficult topic. I wasn't planning on being emotional about it. But
take your time.
Yeah. One of the state troopers, his name's Howie. Unfortunately, I can't remember his last name, but he realized that this wasn't your normal case that he was dealing with. As I said before, nothing ever happens in our county, and he saw Clark not as someone getting arrested, but he knew something was wrong. So he went in. He says, "Hey, Clark." He never met the guy prior to this. Says, "You did not talk to anybody." And lo and behold, throughout the time, they realized that Clark was the innocent individual over this time. And Clark actually stayed in our jail. Usually when you're in a jail, you're not there for a long time. It's usually under a year or you're waiting trial. Clark, I believe, was in our jail for about 4 years because this trial was long drawn out. There was a lot of evidence coming out. And with the murder going on here, it was just something that our county wasn't used to having. And during his time, Clark was actually a model inmate. I was only at the jail for under a year. I didn't stay long. But Clark, I would always see him talking to inmates, regardless of age, background. He was there mentoring people. He hated seeing people coming back. Unfortunately, at this time, you see the same people coming in and out. Actually, I remember one day somebody was being released, and he refused to leave because he had nowhere to go. He was homeless, and he had everything he needed at the jail. So it breaks my heart actually thinking about that because I can picture. I remember that day like it was yesterday. Granted, that was back in 2016. But
and let's clarify real quick too, because you had mentioned you were at the jail, but you were there as a correctional officer, not an inmate. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So one day Clark came up to me. I came up to him. We were talking a little bit, and Clark came up to me, says, "Pivko," once again, you're one of the few people that can pronounce my last name for some reason. But he came up to me and said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I kind of gave him my Eli Manning look, my lost and confused look for those who follow New York Giants football. He's since retired. But I wasn't prepared for that statement. He's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "You're too nice of a guy to be here. What are you doing here with these clowns?" And lo and behold, I was actually questioning myself as that. And I was scared to give him the right answer because I wasn't sure if he was playing my games with me. Like, I knew him. I thought he was very well respected inmate. I talked to him here and there, but something about that, it started to change my mind as well. I said, "Hey, this guy knows that I don't belong here, that he sees something better than what I was doing." And at the same time, I was kind of questioning my decision making at that point. It's kind of weird. When I was in college, I always wanted to get into law enforcement. But when I was in corrections, I was like, I'm here, and this is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt bad that all my years of taking criminology classes and all those classes, I'm like, wow, I just wasted my tuition on that, and I'm still paying off for that, and here I am. But lo and behold, to wrap up on Clark, he had a life sentence, but lo and behold, his case dropped to a manslaughter. He ended up serving 5 years. He spent the last 9 months in Northern State Prison, which is in Newark, maybe about an hour away from where I currently am. And ever since then, he got out. He became an motivational speaker. He's been on talk shows. He's been on a bunch of television shows, documentaries. Unfortunately, we had this thing last year called COVID, so a lot of his speaking engagements got canceled or postponed, and they're starting to become rescheduled as well. Clark works about 10 minutes from where I am right now, and I get to see him. I talk to him on Facebook every once in a while, too. When I started school last year, I would talk to him back and forth all the time, but now since all my classes are going to be any busier, but the thing about friendship is you can talk to somebody every day, or you can talk to them once a week. You can talk to them once a month. However, an ideal friendship is you may not hear from them for a while, but the moment you talk to them, it feels like you just saw them. When Clark became released, he started speaking he spoke at a centenary university over in Hackettstown. That was his first speaking engagement. I made sure to go up to him and say, hey, I'm here for you. Thank you for your time. And actually, when I think about it, I worked at a medical facility, and he came in, and I kind of it was like a triple look, like, wait, is that Clark? Wait, is that Pivko? Is that Clark? Is that Pivko? And I said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but it's like, Derek, I know exactly who you are. And that just caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting that. He's been through so much. Why is he going to remember a quiet correction officer who did not belong in that atmosphere? But lo and behold, a friendship has since developed, and without him, I would not be where I am right now.
Yeah. And it's a great story because, I think there's obviously stereotypes and thoughts of people, and you go to jail, you go to prison, you're a bad person, you're a bad guy, a bad woman, whatever the case may be, and that's not always the circumstances. Some bad decisions. Obviously, Clark made a bad decision in committing murder, but he was damaged, and you see this a lot of times where it could manifest in a lot of different ways, not just violence, but, sometimes people just shut down. I mean, Clark could have very easily went into hibernation for the rest of his life and not speaking. So, but I want to talk about you a little bit in the role. So, you were a correctional officer, and it sounds like the feeling I get through your story and the conversations that we've had before today's interview, that did you feel like a fish out of water? Like you were starting to realize this wasn't what you wanted. You went to school for it, but we're at that point in time before you met Clark, were you contemplating a change? I mean, or, I know for me, there's been times in my early 20s and 30s where, I was in this job and it was the ideal job, right? It was going to pay the bills and I could raise a family and so forth and so on. But I wasn't being fulfilled. Like, it wasn't my passion. But there was this fear. There's this fear that I can't leave this. This is a great opportunity. If I leave this, so what was going through your mind a little bit, before that chance meeting and conversation with them?
Yeah, my mind is that, well, for starters, I also have a degree in journalism. I have an associate's degree in journalism and a bachelor's in communications. So when I met the inmates, I was putting the story together. Coming from where I live, I get the newspaper. I knew most of these individuals before I even got started. Being in journalism, what do? We do our research, we do our background. So when I walked in, I'm like, oh, that's so-and-so, that's this person as well. So I knew who they were before they even knew who I was. So my perspective on corrections is a little bit different because I know the story, I know the background. However, at the end of the day, I don't know the individual until I talk to them. You can do all the research in the world, but until you talk to the individual and say, hey, this is why they did this. Every story is different. Everyone has a different story, and And I am 100% glad I went into corrections. I met some good people from my coworkers, and there were a lot of good inmates as well. The only thing is they made a mistake in their life, and they paid for what they did. We've all made mistakes in our past. We've done stuff to our bodies, or we might have done something else that we should get arrested for. But lo and behold, we didn't get caught.
Yeah. And then after you had your conversation, was it kind of a chance meeting with Clark, or I mean, had you guys been friendly and conversational before, or was this just kind of like unexpected, out of the blue, that he came up and asked you, like, what are you doing here? This isn't a role for you.
Clark was different.
Yeah.
He was not like your other inmates. We have some people that would come and go all the time. Clark is a big guy. And he's probably, when he watches, he's probably say, no, I'm not 6'3", or however tall he is. He's, as I said before, I'm not even 6 foot. I wish I was, but he stood out. He was a big guy, and you just tell that he didn't belong in this area. He made a mistake in his life, and he paid for it. And he always says, do not follow what I did. But what Clark did was he changed my life. And the reason why, actually, as I said before, I'm back in school for cybersecurity, and probably inquisitive as to how this inmate said, hey, he didn't say go into cybersecurity, because that's not what happened.
Right.
He actually spoke at his high school, Kittatinny High School, over in, I believe it's Frieden, some little town here in Sussex County. And I knew his story. However, when he spoke about it, there was a difference between reading and seeing emotion, someone sharing their story, saying, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what happened. Back in 2020 BC, before COVID, he spoke right in February, right before America started shutting down. And I was at the point where I make yearly goals. I do daily, monthly, yearly goals. My plan was, hey, my degree in communications is not working out. It's not paying the bills for where I see myself in life. I was starting to reevaluate myself, saying, hey, you got to move forward. Whatever you're doing, you got to start changing. And lo and behold, I went to Clark's presentation. I've been to one, but the second one really clicked with me. And what happened was, we're going back to Dennis Pegg, the night that Pegg was murdered. The next day, the state police went over to Pegg's house, and they found his computer. And lo and behold, they found some horrible images of children. And the way that Clark spoke about it says, hey, these state troopers broke into the guy's computer, and they found these horrible images, digital evidence. And the way he said that, all of a sudden, the light bulb clicked on in my head for the first time that day. He said, hey, there's something about that. I think I could do that.
Yeah.
And my mind just, like, throughout the end of the presentation, like, I listened to the entire story, but at the end of the day, it's like, Clark just might have changed my life just now. And I remember that night I thought about it, and then it's like, should I message him now? So I messaged him the next day, said, hey, Clark, your presentation, it's my second time doing this, and your presentation completely changed my mind. I've been reevaluating my life, and I think you kind of taught me what I want to do. I want to go back to school for cybersecurity. And I wish I saw Clark's face, because we were talking on Facebook on chat, but I can only imagine what his reaction was. He wrote back, that really wasn't my objective.
Yeah.
But ever since then, I went to, where did I graduate from? Thomas Edison State University was where I first got my first bachelor's degree. So I reapplied there, figured it was the easiest thing, basically because I knew the background system. I knew what they're looking for. So I started speaking to an enrollment counselor. And let's just say I was there for one semester. It didn't work out. I wasn't impressed with the university. They wanted me to take intro to algebra. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not taking classes that I took when I was 19 back in long ago. But
algebra's not that big in cybersecurity anyways. So.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to take a sociology class. I don't want to be taking these classes that 19-year-olds should be taking.
Right.
So I ended up transferring to another school, and I was starting to question, like, hey, you might be making another mistake. You're leaving college. Is that a label saying, hey, this guy's a jumper? This guy's going to say, as soon as he finds a weakness, he's going somewhere else. So that kind of hurt me. But I spoke to an enrollment coordinator. Her name's Tiffany Jones. I am awful with names. However, if I remember somebody, it's for a reason. And one, there's so many great people named Tiffany in my life, so maybe it's just there's not many, but all the Tiffany's that are in my life are just some of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. And I spoke to Tiffany that day and saying, hey, not for nothing. This is why I'm leaving. This is why I'm looking at your school as well. I was looking at another college, and the way she spoke about the program says, not for nothing, but I'm not saying this because I want you to get into this program, because looking at your grades, you're not going to have an issue getting in. But I know your story. I know why you're doing this. You're doing it for the right thing. You can go to another college. However, I think this is the right fit for you. Not a lot of people say that. Yeah. And I ghosted the other university. I don't even know what the other school I was looking at. I think it was like George Mason University. Great school and all, but I was sold on what Colorado State was looking at. And lo and behold, it's probably the best decision I made in the past decade, without question.
You said something in your bio that I received, and I like this sentence. I was looking for it, and I found it here. It says, one sentence can completely change someone's opinion and influence them to make changes. And I think that's an excellent quote, because it's so true. And you don't know who is going to say what that changes your perception, changes your mind. But for you, it was Clark. And I don't know if we ever said Clark's last name. What is Clark's full name?
Clark's full name is Clark Fredericks.
Fredericks. Okay. So people could probably find him on YouTube and social media. But and then there was another part where you were in your 30s, or you're in your 30s, and you're making this decision, and that takes a lot of courage as well, because I think the expectation of us in society, at least Western society, is that by the time you're 30, you should be in a career, in your job. You should be raising kids and whatever, and it's getting better, especially with the newer generations that's coming in. But that's not the case. You're never too old, or it's never too late in life to make a jump. And it sounds like you kind of learned that from Clark a little bit, as well as your other friend that prompted you to attend Colorado State. So you're studying cybersecurity, which I can relate to, because I work a little bit in cybersecurity as well. What's going to be next for you? What's your next step once you get out of school? I mean, what are you hoping to do?
You sound like my parents right now.
Yeah, that's the dad in me. There you go.
There you go. I am 6 classes away from graduation. If I have everything laid out in the back of my plans, my target date to graduation would be February 13th of 2022. Not that I know the date off the top of my head, but it's a good question. I'm 6 classes away, and at the same time, when you're 6 classes away, you start focusing on your next step. And I wish I had the next step, but I think I found it recently too. Now, when you're doing cybersecurity, you learn all different variables, different areas of study. I learned that I am not going to be writing queries on MySQL. That is not what I want to do in my life. If I do, I don't. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah,
that's just not for me. However, recently I finished one of my ethics classes, Information Technology Ethics, ITS 460. I was actually looking at the Microsoft Word document before we spoke, so I actually remember the name of the class. But lo and behold, I realized that I have a background in journalism. With that comes a background in technical writing. And recently, I attended a virtual FBI panel discussion through the University of Albany Law School. And I found that out on LinkedIn. One of my friends sent me this message saying, hey, I think this would be perfect for you. Lo and behold, my friend Jamie was correct. And I attended the panel discussion. I was in it with my cybersecurity professor from that current semester, and we were going back and forth. They said, hey, how come we never went over this? I'm like, well, that's in that so-and-so class. I'm like, roger that. So, but we had a good conversation, and when they were talking about the careers in this, lo and behold, obviously they're going to be advertising University of Albany Law School, because lo and behold, when they do a panel discussion through a university, their objective is to try at least get 1 or 2 students to possibly attend the university. At the end of the day, we are dollar signs. Granted, University of Albany is watching this discussion. Let's just ignore that last sentence I just said. But I was really impressed by the way they handled the presentation. And if they can do a presentation like this, I became even more inquisitive, saying, what are they going to do with their students as well? Mm-hmm. So I finished up my semester back on the May 30th. And last week, I actually went up to check out their school. I was at the University of Albany Law School, walked around for about an hour and a half. I asked a bunch of questions because I was very interested in seeing what their background is. And I want to say, hey, where do you see yourself doing? What are the age gaps of the people in the classes? Or is it people who are just attending grad or who are just getting their bachelor's degree and moving on to the master's? Who are the people in the classroom? So they said basically the average person age span in the class is about 38. So for once in my life, I'm going to be one of the younger people in the classroom. So for me. But everyone's different. He says, we look at the grades. He asked what my GPA was, and it says, you're not going to have a problem getting in. So I'm like, okay. And I was just blown away by what they have to offer, the background of research, and the ability that I'm only going to get better through this. I'm not going to be an attorney. Let's just when you hear law school, everyone says attorney. That's not what I want to do. They have a degree in cybersecurity policy and procedures, writing the SOPs. And when I was taking my cybersecurity course in my ethics class, we were writing SOPs. And so lo and behold, that's actually what I became interested in. When I took cybersecurity for the first time, I never thought that I would want to write the SOPs. But lo and behold, right. Having a degree in communications and journalism, take what you're good at, and lo and behold, this is what I'm good at. So I like the research portion of it, and I'm excited for what my future is going to be. Am I going to know everything? No. Am I going to get better at it? Yes, and that's what excites me.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got the sky's the limit, really, for you. I mean, because you've got the communication, you have journalism, you've got criminal justice, you've got cybersecurity. So I don't know, maybe you take a page from Clark's book. Maybe you'll be on a stage one of these days, schooling everybody on the do's and don'ts, and see if you can finally get people to stop using the same passwords with every different same emails for all their logins. But who knows? That's cybersecurity. If you're in cybersecurity, you'll understand that. But, absolutely. Well, as we get ready to wrap up here, I always like to throw in a final question, and sometimes I don't remember if I warned you or not. Sometimes I don't warn people, so it kind of hits them. But basically, as we close here today, what would be the final words of wisdom that you would like to leave for the listeners? Like, if they take anything away from this conversation today, what do you want them to take away?
Good question. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know who's going to change your life. Some people, the person behind you at the grocery line, lo and behold, might become your best friend one day. Yep. It's a great question. And you never know who's going to change your life. Lo and behold, when I worked in corrections, when day one was my thing, say, hey, one day a inmate's going to change your life. If I said that, I would have given you a deer in headlights and said, all right, I'm running out the door right now. And you can find me whatever it was to break my contract. But it's interesting where life takes you. I met some great people in my life. And as I said, and when I was talking to her earlier, I think the hardest word in the dictionary to define is friendship, because every day you're tested to it. For better, you're challenging it, and lo and behold, you realize who your real friends are. I can call somebody, and just based on their tone of voice, I know how they're doing. I don't have to listen to their words, but if I hear how they're doing, if one of my good friends, if he's talking like this, he's having a great day, I can tell that he may not be having a bad day because he's putting up a mask. However, when you get to know somebody after a while, you get to know who they are when they're at the best and when they're at their worst.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great words, and keeping. I think for us, and it's an ever, a never-ending battle, I think, for society, but just being open and being willing to listen to another person's story, despite their background, despite their mistakes, despite their struggles. And like you said, you end up with a friendship that could change your whole course, the whole course that you had mapped out for yourself. But
I would not be in college. I would not be returning to college if it wasn't for my conversation with Clarkson. What are you doing with these? What are you doing with these clowns? If we didn't have that conversation, who knows? I may have never had that friendship with Clark afterwards. So you never realize how one small conversation leads to a career change. And I owe a good chunk of my past year to Clark because he's making me into a better person by basically reinventing my future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Derek, it's been fun having you on the show. I appreciate you coming on, sharing the story, and let's stay in touch. And down the road, once you get a little deeper into your career as a cybersecurity, whatever that turns into, whether it's like you said, the technical writer, or even if you get into some of the deeper weeds of cybersecurity, let's touch base again, and we'll catch up and see how life's changed for you even more.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere.